Hi, Rena. How are you tonight?
Hi, Tracy. I am good.
It's so good to see you. We haven't seen each other in person since
Uh,
like March, February
February,
time. Yeah,
March, something like that. Yes,
it's been a
it's been a
while.
long time.
Yeah. But I'm so glad I could catch you tonight. I know this week is Tech Week for your upcoming show, Stitch and Witness.
It
Um,
is indeed.
I really appreciate you taking the time out of your week. I know Tech Week can get crazy, so I'm so happy to talk to you and have some time to talk about the show.
Yes, I'm happy to be here. And I will say this is the least stressful tech I have ever had.
Really? Well, that's
Yes,
good.
because honestly, it's mostly on Shelby, our stage manager, and Matt, who is our sound designer and audio engineer. So they have a lot to do and figure out, but I mean, there's still plenty to do in terms of, making sure everything gets done that needs to get done. But
It
yeah,
must be a
it's
nice break for you to be able to kind of step back and let everybody else take charge and step up to the plate a little bit.
yes, it's
That's
been
awesome.
fantastic.
Yeah. It's nice to have a great team to put things together with. That's one of the things that I've been hearing from the other people that I've talked to. I talked to
Hmm.
Alexis so far, and I've talked to Rose and Angela, and everybody um, who I've gotten to speak with has said over and over again how great it is to work with a team of people that you can not only rely on as professional colleagues, but that you have a good relationship with too. A lot of people in the cast and production crew are friends from past shows.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's been really great. I mean, I think this whole pandemic threw everybody for a curve, right?
Definitely.
Um, and it was certainly disappointing and not being able to do our show live and in person. Um, but I will say that for me anyway, and I think others would say the same thing, it's been really healing
Hmm.
to work on this piece with the collaborators we have, knowing that we've all worked together, on a number of shows and we trust each other implicitly. We feel safe with each other. Um, Literally, the beginning of every rehearsal, Rose, our director, just does a check in with everybody. How you doing? How you doing today? And we literally just take 15 minutes to chat and catch up, um, because yeah, it's a weird time.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah,
It's so nice to hear that arts organizations like Third Eye are cognizant of their artists' emotional states and just the personal things going on in everybody's lives, because that does really affect what you bring to a performance and what you bring to a rehearsal. um,
absolutely.
Yeah, I know working from you in the past, you've always been very conscious of that, not only from an artistic perspective, but just from like a human perspective.
Aw.
Yeah, it's reassuring, and it's very nice to know that everyone's being taken care of from a mental health standpoint too in the show. I
Well,
just think
yeah,
it's so important.
it's very important. I mean, as artists, like we're bringing in our own selves, right, to a rehearsal process,
Yeah,
and I don't understand why it would ever not be that way. But
yeah,
I think we've all unfortunately had those experiences where it hasn't been that way. And
hmm,
I created a company that I wanted to work at myself
yeah,
and want other people to work at, right? And have that same feeling like, yeah, this is somewhere I want to work. And, I think being able to be really open with each other and honest about how we're feeling is really important because, you might have somebody who's not themselves that day and it's fine, just being aware of that and honoring that, I think
yeah,
is very important.
yeah, absolutely. So, on that note, since you're the founder and president of the company, um, why did you choose Stitch and Witness for this performance?
Well, so for those who don't know, we actually performed Stitch live in June of 2019. It was a labor of love. We literally had no budget, and we went into planning our season in 2019 thinking, we were going to do one show, one big show, which is kind of what we normally do.
Mhm.
Um, we were on a company call, and Rose, who's in uh, Philadelphia going to grad school at Temple, she was on that call and she said, "Hey, I'm going to be in town in May and let's do something." I was like, "Okay, you want to do Stitch?" So we had actually looked at this piece in 2018 and just couldn't figure out a way to put it into our season. It was a piece that literally all of us just fell in love with it. Um, and we really wanted to find a way to do it. And so I told Rose, "Hey, you want to do Stitch?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'd love to do Stitch." I said, "Great. You have no budget. Uh, you have to use the company members as the performers because we don't have money to pay anybody." Um,
Things that every
and
director loves to hear, I'm sure.
you know what, though? Rose will kill me for saying this, but she knows it's true. She does her best work when she has like nothing.
You just kind of get to build from the ground up, though, right? I mean, it forces you into a very creative space when you have to be scrappy
Absolutely.
and figure it out.
Yes, and we've sort of made a name for ourselves being scrappy and yeah, so we did this show in June of 2019, but we weren't really sure. Well, one, it was a budget thing, right? So renting space, of course, is expensive. So we decided to do just one weekend, but it was also sort of like, well, we all love this show, but it's a little avant-garde, right? It's a little different. It's not a linear narrative. The words to the show are a lot of sewing terms, and it's
Mhm.
almost like a coded language, right? That we all as performers understand, but like we're like, I don't know, is the audience going to know what's going on?
We hope
So
so.
we felt like we were kind of taking a risk by doing it. And we're like, well, let's, do it for a couple nights and see what happens. And the audiences responded so enthusiastically about this piece. And people told us like it was the best work they'd ever seen us do.
Wow.
And people really were moved by this piece. And so a lot of people didn't get to see it because it was only 2 nights, and we had a lot of people saying, "Hey, are you going to ever do Stitch again?" And so when we were planning for 2020, we decided, well, why not bring it back, right? And do it for an extended run. And, none of us were mad about it because we love the piece. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that was how Stitch came about. And of course, we went into it thinking we were going to do this live. um, and obviously the world had other plans for
Right.
us.
And
um,
2020 happened.
2020 happened. We all know how that story goes.
Mhm.
Wah wah. um, make lemonade out of lemons and all that good stuff. So that was really how Stitch came about. And then for Witness came along sort of later in the game when we had already decided that we were going to try to do Stitch virtually. And I was not part of the initial conversations, so I don't want to misstate anything, but I believe Alexis came to Rose with this idea. So Alexis had written this piece, Witness,
Mhm.
and from my understanding, it was more of like an album, right, of songs.
Mhm.
Again, I hope I'm not misstating anything. Don't hate me, Alexis, if I am.
We went
And
into a long conversation with Rose about how labels don't matter, and
okay,
Witness is an opera, and it's a song cycle, and it's an album, and it's everything that you need it to be in that moment. So I don't think anybody's going to be offended if we call it an album, because it
okay,
works in all of those facets too. I think that's what's really fascinating about the show.
right, absolutely. And so I think Alexis was looking for like, hey, I want to produce this and do something more than just like write the music. And how do we do that? And so she asked Rose, like, well, would Third Eye be interested in producing this? And then Rose came to the rest of the company, and we were like, yeah, great. Let's do it. Stitch is only 35 minutes, so it's a pretty short show. So that allowed us time to do a double bill. So,
Yeah.
and we've all worked with Alexis and we all love her. So it
Yeah.
was a great opportunity to collaborate with her again.
And the shows, even though thematically they're pretty different, the way that they're tied together is so unique, and it's so appropriate for this moment, right? um
Hmm.
Rose, I believe, is the one who has kind of coined the tie together, is that correct? Yeah.
Yes,
So
that's
she
her job as the director.
is make it work. So she's tied the two shows together under the umbrella of isolation, yearning, and growth through the woman's
Hmm.
gaze,
Hmm.
and also the idea of people striving to both see and be seen. And
Hmm.
I think that that's so appropriate for 2020 because we've seen that in so many different ways this year,
Hmm.
both in the civil rights movements that we're witnessing, that we are witnesses to, um, and also the just the isolation that everyone, I think, has felt during this pandemic, not being able to be in the same room with each other, and that's how the show is being produced as well, right? None of you have been able to rehearse together, it's all virtually.
Correct. So we have not been in the same physical space ever throughout this entire process. The only time any two individuals were together in a space, well, Alexis and Matt have been together to work on the audio recording aspect of it. And then Tamsin, who is our photographer and artist, who has some amazing images that are going to be in both of these shows, which I'm really excited about. Um, she did photo shoots at her home, but we did them one at a time. She was far away from us wearing a mask. So yeah, we recorded everything in isolation. And then Matt put it together on the audio side, mixed everything together, and we have rehearsed everything in isolation. And yeah, it's been an interesting experience. Um, I
Definitely.
think at first I was kind of like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna like this, right? Because there's something about the the energy of the other people in the room, right? That you're totally missing.
Yeah.
Um, but somehow magically it works. Um, and I think part of that might be because we're so familiar with each other that we already kind of know what the other person is doing, even if we're not looking at our screen, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We've collaborated together a lot, and I think we we know each other well as performers.
Mhm.
Um, I think it might be different if we didn't have that base to begin with, but I don't know.
But you have such a strong bond already, and um I'm sure it helps a lot to be able to trust the people that you're working with, and
Absolutely.
know that they're going to catch you even if you can't quite see each other. Quite- Even if you quite don't quite know that they're still there next to you.
Right.
um so in Stitch, you actually play one of the characters. You play Lachesis, who is one of the three fates, and your job as a fate is to measure the thread of life, which is so
Hmm.
important, of course, because it determines, how long somebody's life is going to be, what circumstances they might find themselves in. So of course I have to ask you, what is it like playing a goddess? I know you do every day, but in this show at least.
Yes, yes. In my everyday life, I play a goddess, but occasionally I play one on stage too. So, first of all, I would say if anyone ever offers you the chance to play a goddess, Tracy, you snatch that up
Got
because
it.
everyone wants to play a powerful woman. That is where it's at, right?
Mhm.
Um, but all joking aside, I think so. My character, and it's interesting. None of us actually have names. So we are tied to the three fates, and the fate I am tied to is Lachesis, but my actual character name is I'm Worker 3. So yeah, so now I totally lost my train of thought where I was even going with that. But
How does the backstory of being tied to a goddess inform your performance of the piece?
yeah, so she is the measurer, as you said. So for those who aren't familiar with the three fates, really quick, they're three sisters. There's Clotho, and played by Angela Bourne in this version of Stitch, and she spins the thread of life. And then there's Lachesis, who is my fate that I am associated with, and she measures life. So she basically determines how long people get to live. And then we have Atropo, who cuts the thread of life, and she gets to determine when people die. So, what's really interesting too is that in Greek mythology, they believe that the three fates, who were three sisters, would show up within 3 days of a child being born and determine the fate of that child right then and there.
Hmm.
So that's pretty,
They were in a good mood then.
you know, I guess sometimes they weren't, and then it didn't turn out very good for that child and the child's family.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's a really deep thing to look at when you think of, this whole idea of what is fate and destiny versus, how can circumstances change things.
Right.
Um,
And
so
your power
obviously,
in those circumstances too. That's
right.
interesting to ponder.
Well, and it's interesting too because it's I don't know, Rose might hate me for saying this, but from my perspective, it's like these goddesses have this power, but as the workers, we are oppressed and we don't have the power. So it's this like interesting juxtaposition of those being in power, but not being in power.
Sure. Sure.
Um, so I mean, I think for me, in terms of like deciding, my character is really the peacemaker. Um, she, I feel like she knows like, hey, this is our fate, this is our destiny. So we might as well just be resigned to it,
Mm.
even though it's painful, even though we don't like it. It's easier this way than, like, for example, Mary's character is really the revolutionary, right? She wants to revolt and stand up to the overseer, who is a silent character that we never see in Stitch, but he's sort of out there watching over the three of us, to make sure that we're doing what we need to be doing.
Yeah.
So Mary's like the revolutionary, and I say, oh no, no, this is our fate. We just have to put our heads down and we have to work and
Sure.
get things done.
Yeah. There's like a certain dignity in that resolution. It there is a strength of character, even though in some ways it might feel like you're ceding that control, but there's a strength of character in um choosing your battles, choosing when you're going to
Hmm.
fight and when you're just going to say, I'm here for, in a lot of our lives, it's like, I'm here for the paycheck and then I'm going home. And you don't get the rest. You don't get that emotional side of me. You don't get that personal side of me. Like, I am here for this amount and then I'm setting up my boundaries and I'm done. So I think that's really
Absolutely.
interesting. And I'm excited to see all three of you play with those characters and explore those different spaces.
Hmm.
Speaking
Yeah.
of
If
spaces,
you,
oh,
oh,
sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was
I
gonna
was just No, we're just going to talk over each other. Let's keep doing it.
It's fine. It's great. I was going to say, speaking of spaces, it must also be really interesting to perform in your own home. Um,
Uh-huh.
has Stitch changed your outlook at all on the fashion industry or your outlook on how you relate to any of your clothing choices?
So I mean, certainly it has made me more conscious of understanding like what I put on my body every day and thinking about who made those clothes
Mhm.
and under what conditions did they make those clothes? Were they paid a fair wage? Um, I think that I'm not going to say I never thought about it before, but it was not top of my mind, right? I
Mhm.
mean, we put most of us put clothes on every day. Um, and I don't know how much conscious thought goes into thinking about those things, right? I think we think about what are we gonna look good in? What are we comfortable in? What's gonna make us feel a certain way, which is all fine and good, because clothing is a part of our identity, but also being conscious that there are people who are making these clothes and understanding like how are they being treated. And so I can't say I've changed any behavior yet because I have not purchased any clothing since the pandemic.
Well, that in itself is a choice too. I mean, in my research for marketing for the show, I found out that extending the life of any article of clothing by 9 months actually reduces its environmental impact by up to 30%.
Oh my gosh, I'm doing great.
You're doing
I
so
have
good.
clothes from like that I've had for 20 years. I kid you not, that I
You're
still
doing it.
wear. I'm
You're doing the work
like
already.
I hang on to my clothes because I usually buy very like classic
Hmm.
things. I don't buy a lot of trendy stuff. And part of, I guess I never really thought about it in the sense of like, you know, being sustainable, but it was more of like, well, I don't want to have to buy clothes all the time because that costs money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you were able to talk directly to the audience, which I guess we're doing right now anyway, but um, what is what are you hoping that the audience takes away from this show?
So I think there's a few things. First of all, I hope people show up to watch the show. That's the first step,
Yeah,
right? Getting people to watch the show.
absolutely.
Um, I think specifically for Stitch, that's the show that I'm most closely tied with. Um, I would say that I hope people, I hope it just raises people's awareness and makes them curious about finding out more about, you know, ethical sources of clothing. They don't have to swap out their entire closet overnight. Making multiple small changes leads to making a big change, right?
Definitely.
Um, and so I hope it just really gives people some perspective, right? Um, on a larger scale, I would say, well, and witness, certainly um, I hope that people will again become more curious about the journey of transgender individuals. And I don't want to give anything away, but just having a different perspective, right? I'm sure there will be people watching who have trans friends, and it's like, yeah, I know a similar story, but I think there'll also be people watching who don't have any experience. And I think, that's why we tell these stories, is to give perspective,
Yeah.
and a different perspective than what you might have going into it. So that's what I hope for every show, is really just, people gaining perspective and being able to talk about it. And, that is our tagline: to see, imagine, converse, and that it sparks conversations with the people in their lives. Um, I'm going to say from a broader perspective, I really hope that by watching what we are doing, that people will understand the value and the importance of the arts and keeping them alive. Um, we're in a really critical moment right now, in the world of the arts, and most of us are not working, um, and we're not getting funding from the government, and it's going to be interesting to see where the arts end up when we get to the other side of this. And I'm not trying to get into a political conversation, but I really want people to understand that the arts are so vital to our survival, right? If you look around, like, what things have you been engaging in during this pandemic, right?
Absolutely.
um, Watching Netflix, guess what? Those people are actors, those people get paid for their craft, for their art. People looking at things, looking at Pinterest, watch Instagram, all those things. I mean, art is everywhere. You can't avoid it. And we need people to create it, and we need to support those people. So that was a very long-winded answer, but
No, that was great. That was amazing. And it is very important to first of all see the show. Everyone should see the show.
yes, please come, please come.
On that
If you
note,
want to watch three women break down, this is where you're going to do it.
who d- I watch that in the mirror every day. I would love to see to see some more people like me out there. On that note, I mean, we have over 100 people signed up for tickets right now. Um,
Mhm.
I would love to see 2,000 people see this show. I would
I
see everybody in the world see the show because I, even though I'm still learning about it, I feel that it's such an important message to be able to connect with people. And like you were saying, to keep that open mind and be able to have conversations, um,
mhm,
as well as supporting artists. I think that's something that we sometimes miss in society, just not being able to
mhm,
have important conversations like this and keep those that open-minded perspective too. um so I don't know, I'm really excited about this show. I hope everyone else is too. If you are interested in Stitch and Witness, make sure you register for tickets on Eventbrite. Tickets are free this year because we believe in supporting our community and opening these performances to as many people as possible. But there is a suggested $10 donation if you're able. So we appreciate everybody who is listening to this interview, and thank you so much and have a great night. Thanks for joining me, Rena.
oh, thank you, Tracy, it was fun.
Have a good night. Bye bye.
Thanks, bye.